Story 1. I'm a highway patrol officer. My eyes saw a tired family, but my dash cam saw rotting corpses smiling at me. I am parked directly under the harsh, buzzing fluorescent canopy of a 24-hour fuel station. I have locked all 4 doors. I have the engine running, the heater turned on high, and all the interior lights illuminated. I am surrounded by concrete and artificial light, and I still cannot stop my hands from shaking against the steering wheel. I am a county law enforcement officer. I have only been on the force for 2 years, but I have built a reputation for being strict, thorough, and completely reliant on protocol. I like rules. I like guidelines. In this line of work, the manual is your best tool. If you follow the steps, if you run the plates, if you approach the vehicle at the correct angle, you eliminate variables and maintain control of the situation. My assigned patrol sector is a massive, desolate stretch of a 2-lane county highway. It is a lonely, isolated assignment. The road runs along the eastern perimeter of a massive, deep freshwater lake. The layout of the geography means there is absolutely nothing out there. On the left side of the highway, there is a steep, rocky embankment that drops directly down into the dark water of the lake. On the right side, there is an endless, dense expanse of thick pine forest. There are no houses, no streetlights, and no intersecting roads for over 40 miles. It is just a ribbon of dark asphalt trapped between the deep woods and the deep water. I work the graveyard shift. I patrol this highway from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. Usually, the entire 8-hour shift consists of driving back and forth in complete silence, listening to the hum of my tires and the occasional crackle of the dispatch radio. Sometimes I pull over a long-haul trucker who missed a turn or a local teenager driving too fast. It is a quiet, predictable job. Tonight started exactly like every other night. The weather was clear, but very cold. A thick layer of fog was rolling off the surface of the lake, creeping over the embankment and drifting across the asphalt. I was cruising at 40 miles per hour, holding a cup of lukewarm coffee, scanning the dark road ahead with my headlights. At approximately 2:15 a.m., I saw a vehicle driving a few miles ahead of me. I sped up slightly to close the distance. It was a dark-colored minivan, an older model. It was traveling well under the speed limit, moving at maybe 30 miles per hour. As I got closer, I noticed 2 things. First, the passenger side taillight was completely burned out. Second, the vehicle was swerving. It was not a violent, erratic swerve, but a slow, drifting weave. The tires drifted over the solid yellow line in the center of the road, corrected, slowly, and then drifted back over the white shoulder line near the edge of the lake embankment. Protocol for this is clear. A burned-out taillight is a minor traffic violation, but combined with the swerving, it establishes reasonable suspicion for driving under the influence or extreme driver fatigue. I had to initiate a traffic stop. I pulled up behind the minivan, keeping a safe distance of 3 car lengths. I reached down to the center console and flipped the switch for my overhead emergency lights. The flashing red and blue strobes instantly illuminated the dark highway, reflecting off the thick pine trees on the right and cutting through the fog drifting off the lake on the left. The driver of the minivan reacted slowly. It took them nearly a quarter of a mile to register the lights in their rearview mirror. Eventually, the right turn signal blinked, and the van slowly pulled over onto the narrow gravel shoulder, coming to a stop just a few feet away from the steep drop-off into the water. I pulled my cruiser onto the shoulder behind them. I followed my training exactly. I offset my vehicle slightly to the left, creating a safety corridor between my cruiser and the flow of traffic. I angled my front wheels toward the road, so if a drunk driver rear-ended my cruiser, it would not be pushed forward into the minivan. I put the transmission in park, unbuckled my seatbelt, and grabbed my heavy metal flashlight. I stepped out into the cold night air. The only sounds were the low rumble of the 2 idling engines, the crunch of the gravel under my boots, and the faint rhythmic lapping of the lake water hitting the rocks at the bottom of the embankment. I walked up to the rear of the minivan. I reached out with my left hand and firmly pressed my palm against the trunk lid. This is another standard protocol. You leave your fingerprints on the vehicle. If something happens to you, the investigators will have physical proof that you were standing right behind that specific car. The metal of the trunk felt unusually cold and damp. I walked up the driver's side, keeping my flashlight pointed low. I stopped just behind the driver's side window, angling my body so I was not an easy target if the driver decided to open the door aggressively. I tapped the glass with my flashlight. The window rolled down manually with a squeaking sound. I shined the beam of my flashlight into the interior of the van. It was a perfectly normal family. The driver was a middle-aged woman. She looked incredibly exhausted. Her hair was messy, and there were dark, heavy bags under her eyes. She squinted against the glare of my flashlight. Sitting in the passenger seat was a middle-aged man. He was wearing a plaid flannel shirt. His head was tilted back against the headrest, his eyes closed, lightly snoring. He looked completely relaxed. I moved the beam of the flashlight to the back seat. There were 2 young children, a boy and a girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old. They were both fast asleep, their heads leaning against the cold glass of the side windows. There was a pile of blankets and pillows shoved between them. It looked exactly like a family pushing through the final, exhausting hours of a long road trip. "Good evening, ma'am," I said, keeping my voice polite but firm. "I am stopping you tonight because your passenger side tail light is completely out, and I noticed you were having some trouble maintaining your lane." The woman rubbed her face with a tired hand. "I am so sorry, officer," she said. Her voice was quiet and hoarse. "We have been driving for a very long time. We just wanted to get there before morning. I guess I am more tired than I realized." "It happens," I replied. "But driving exhausted on this stretch of highway is dangerous, especially this close to the Ihaikichai water. I need to see your license, registration, and proof of insurance, please." She nodded slowly. She reached across the sleeping man in the passenger seat, opened the glove compartment, and pulled out a small stack of papers. She handed them to me along with a plastic driver's license. When her fingers brushed against mine, her skin felt freezing cold. It felt like touching a piece of ice. "I am going to take these back to my cruiser and run your information," I told her. "I will be right back. Please remain in the vehicle." She did not say anything. She just gave me a slow, tired nod and looked straight ahead through the windshield. I turned around and walked back to my cruiser. I climbed into the driver's seat, pulled the heavy door shut, and placed the license and registration on the center console. I turned on the overhead dome light so I could read the small print. I picked up my radio microphone. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I am initiating a traffic stop on a dark-colored minivan, requesting a plate check." The radio crackled. The dispatcher on duty tonight was an older woman who usually worked the quiet shifts. "Copy that, Unit 4. Go ahead with the plate number." I read the alphanumeric sequence off the registration paper. "Copy," she replied. "Stand by. The system is running a little slow tonight." I put the microphone down. I settled back into the seat, enjoying the warm air blowing from the heater vents. The heavy protocol of the stop was complete. Now, I just had to wait for the computer system to verify the documents, write a simple warning ticket for the broken taillight, and advise the tired mother to pull over and rest. While I waited, I glanced down at my center console. Mounted directly below the radio is a small, heavy-duty monitor. It displays the live video feed from the cruiser's dashboard camera. The camera records continuously during a traffic stop, capturing everything that happens directly in front of my vehicle. The video is strictly black and white, designed to capture high-contrast details like license plates in low-light conditions. Out of pure ingrained habit, I looked at the monitor to ensure the camera was recording the minivan. I stopped breathing. The image displayed on the small screen was wrong. It was entirely, fundamentally wrong. I looked at the screen, and my brain struggled to process the visual information. The camera was pointed directly at the space in front of my cruiser. The red and blue strobe lights were flashing across the scene in alternating waves of bright white and deep black. The vehicle on the monitor was not the minivan I had just walked away from. The van on the screen was crushed. The roof was caved entirely inward, bending the metal frame down toward the seats. The rear bumper was twisted and hanging off by a single rusted bolt. The exterior was completely covered in thick, dark, hanging layers of aquatic algae and river weeds. The tires were flat, rotting, and half buried in thick mud. It looked exactly like a vehicle that had been pulled from the bottom of a lake after decades underwater. But that was not the part that made my blood turn to ice. The dashboard camera was positioned directly behind the rusted, crushed rear window of the van. The glass was shattered. Looking out through the broken back window, staring directly into the lens of the dashboard camera, were 4 faces. They were bloated. They were skeletal. The flesh on their faces was gray, peeling away from the bone in wet, ragged strips. Their eye sockets were empty, dark, hollow pits filled with stagnant water. They were pressed tightly together in the back of the crushed vehicle. The mother, the father, the 2 children. They were all looking directly at the camera, and they were smiling. It was not a natural expression. Their jawbones were pulled back, stretching the rotting, waterlogged skin into wide, unnatural, gaping grins. They were completely motionless, suspended in the grainy black and white feed, just staring and smiling at the lens. A wave of suffocating panic slammed into my chest. My hands gripped the edges of the monitor so hard my knuckles turned white. I thought the camera system was malfunctioning. I tore my eyes away from the screen and looked up through my windshield. Parked 20 feet in front of me was the pristine, dark-colored minivan. The metal was clean. The roof was perfectly intact. The red glow of the functional brake light illuminated the gravel shoulder. Through the back window, I could see the silhouette of the 2 children sleeping peacefully under their blankets. I could see the mother looking into her side mirror, watching my cruiser. Everything was perfectly normal. I looked back down at the monitor. The crushed, rusted, algae-covered wreckage was still there. The 4 rotting, skeletal corpses were still there. They had moved. The mother had raised her hand. A skeletal, bloated arm covered in peeling wet skin and thick green weeds was pressed against the shattered glass of the rear window. She was tapping on the glass from the inside. I could not hear the tapping through the heavy doors of my cruiser, but I could see the bone of her finger hitting the lens on the screen. Tap, tap, tap. They were still smiling that wide, gaping, impossible grin. I felt dizzy. I reached forward with a shaking hand and physically hit the side of the monitor, hoping to reset the feed. The screen flickered, but the image remained. The bloated corpses continued to stare. Suddenly, the radio crackled loudly, breaking the heavy silence in the cruiser. "Unit 4, this is dispatch," the older woman's voice said. She sounded deeply confused. Her professional tone had completely slipped. I grabbed the microphone, fumbling with the cord. "Unit 4. Go ahead." "I ran the plates and the license," she said slowly. "Are you absolutely sure you read that sequence correctly? Are you sure you are looking at a dark minivan?" "Yes," I stammered, my eyes darting between the pristine van out the windshield and the nightmare on the screen. "I am parked right behind it." "Why?" "The system flagged the registration," the dispatcher said. "Those plates belong to a vehicle that was involved in a major missing persons case 30 years ago." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Missing?" "A family of 4, she read from her screen. "They were driving cross-country. They were last seen at a gas station near your current location. The police searched for weeks. The primary theory was that the driver fell asleep at the wheel and the vehicle went off the embankment into the lake. They never found the car. They never found the bodies. The license you gave me belongs to the mother. Her status is listed as legally dead." The radio went silent. I sat completely frozen in the driver's seat. The heater was blowing hot air onto my face, but I was shivering uncontrollably. I slowly raised my head and looked through the windshield. The pristine minivan was gone. It had not driven away. I had not heard the engine start. I had not heard the tires crunching on the gravel. The red brake light was simply gone. The space in front of my cruiser was completely empty. I reached up and engaged the mechanical lever for the high-powered spotlight mounted on the driver's side pillar. I twisted the handle, aiming the bright beam of light directly at the patch of gravel where the van had been parked seconds ago. There were no tire tracks. Instead, covering the gravel shoulder was a massive puddle of thick black stagnant water. The water was actively bubbling, seeping quickly into the dirt. A horrible, foul smell began to enter the air vents of my cruiser. It smelled like dead fish, rotting wood, and ancient stagnant mud. I looked down at the dashboard monitor. The screen was displaying a live feed of the empty gravel shoulder and the puddle of water. The crushed van was gone. The corpses were gone. I dropped the radio microphone onto the passenger seat. I could barely grab the gear shift. I needed to put the cruiser in drive. I needed to turn around and drive away from the lake as fast as the engine would allow. Protocol did not matter anymore. I just needed to leave. I grabbed the gear shift and pulled it down into drive. Before my foot could touch the accelerator, the entire patrol cruiser violently lurched. It was a massive, concussive impact that originated from the right side of the vehicle. The heavy metal frame of the Ford Explorer groaned under the sudden stress. My head snapped to the right, hitting the headrest. The cruiser was moving. It was being dragged sideways. Something was pulling the 2-ton police vehicle across the gravel shoulder, dragging it directly toward the steep embankment that dropped into the black water of the lake. I slammed my foot down on the gas pedal. The powerful engine roared, the RPM needle jumping into the red. The rear tires spun frantically, kicking up a massive cloud of gravel, dirt, and mud. The tires screamed, trying to find traction on the loose shoulder, but the sideways momentum was too strong. We were sliding toward the edge. I turned my head and looked out the passenger side window. The lake was churning. The dark, flat surface of the water was boiling, sending thick, white foam crashing against the rocks. Rising out of the freezing black water were 4 figures. It was the family, the mother, the father, the 2 children, but they were not human anymore. They were the bloated, skeletal, rotting corpses from the camera monitor. Their flesh was gray and peeling. Their empty eye sockets stared blankly at my cruiser. Their jaws were unhinged, locked into that wide, horrific grin. They were suspended in the air. Attached to the back of each rotting corpse was a massive, thick, muscular appendage. They looked like dark, wet, glistening tentacles, thicker than tree trunks, emerging from the deep water of the lake. The tentacles were fused directly into the spines of the corpses, using the dead human bodies like fleshy, rotting puppets. The tentacles extended from the lake, reaching up the rocky embankment. The rotting puppet corpses of the family were pressed directly against the side of my cruiser. Their bloated skeletal hands were gripping the window frames, the door handles, the wheel wells. The strength of the appendages was impossible. They were dragging the heavy police cruiser sideways through the deep gravel, inch by agonizing inch, pulling me closer to the drop-off. The smell of the stagnant water and the rotting flesh was overwhelming, filling the cabin of the cruiser. The metal doors buckled inward under the crushing pressure of the tentacles. The passenger side window shattered, spraying tiny cubes of safety glass across the front seat. One of the bloated, rotting arms reached through the broken window. The skeletal fingers, dripping with thick lake mud, grabbed the fabric of my passenger seat, pulling the cruiser harder toward the cliff. The rear tires of my cruiser slipped over the edge of the embankment. The back of the vehicle dropped violently, the undercarriage slamming against the sharp rocks. My stomach dropped. I was angled upward, staring at the night sky. The black water of the lake was churning wildly, just a few feet below my rear bumper. I had exactly 1 second before the center of gravity shifted completely and the cruiser tumbled backward into the deep water. I grabbed the steering wheel with both hands, locked my elbows, and slammed my heavy police boot completely down on the accelerator pedal. The engine screamed, pushing maximum torque to the all-wheel drive system. The front tires, still gripping the solid asphalt of the highway lane, bit down hard. The rubber burned against the road, filling the air with thick white smoke. For a terrifying, agonizing second, the cruiser held completely stationary, suspended, in a brutal tug-of-war between the horsepower of the engine and the crushing strength of the tentacles in the lake. The metal frame groaned. The engine whined. Then the front tires caught traction. The cruiser violently jerked forward. The sudden explosive forward momentum ripped the vehicle out of the grip of the rotting corpses. I heard a wet, sickening tearing sound as the skeletal, hands gripping the window frame, were physically ripped away from the tentacles. The cruiser launched forward, climbing over the edge of the embankment and slamming hard onto the flat asphalt of the highway. The rear tires caught the road, propelling the vehicle forward like a missile. I did not let off the gas pedal. I kept my foot floored. I looked in the rearview mirror. The massive wet tentacles were writhing on the gravel shoulder, aggressively slapping the ground where my cruiser had just been. The rotting bodies of the family dangled limply from the ends of the appendages. As I sped away, the thing slowly pulled the tentacles back down the embankment, dragging the skeletal puppets beneath the black, churning surface of the lake, disappearing. Without a splash, I drove at over 110 miles per hour down the county highway. I did not turn on my sirens. I did not radio dispatch to tell them what happened. I just drove, staring straight ahead, gripping the wheel until my hands went numb. I did not stop until I saw the bright, artificial canopy of this fuel station. I pulled under the lights and threw the cruiser into park. I have been sitting here ever since. I have checked the passenger side of my vehicle. The window is completely shattered. The heavy metal doors are deeply dented, crushed inward by a massive circular pressure. Sitting on the passenger seat, resting amidst the broken glass, are 3 severed, skeletal fingers, completely coated in thick, foul-smelling lake mud. I am not going back to the station. I am leaving the keys in the ignition, and I am walking away from this job. I do not care about the rules anymore. I am writing this on my phone and posting it here as a direct warning to anyone driving alone at night. If you are traveling down a desolate highway near a large body of deep water and you see a vehicle driving slowly, drifting over the lines, trying to get your attention, do not stop. Do not pull over to help them. Story 2. My wife works downtown. No one has left her building in 48 hours. She had said it was going to be a late night at the office. I remembered that first night well. 9:30 p.m. She still wasn't home. Was probably burning the midnight oil. The thought crossed me. In this sort of market, maybe that's fine. Jobs are a rarity. There are worse things than working hard. I forced myself under the covers, shut my eyes, and waited for sleep to take me. The next morning, when she wasn't splayed out beside me, I convinced myself she must have sauntered in at 11 p.m. and left at 6 a.m., having sprinted through her morning rituals before I'd even had time to separate the blinds. My first text to her was delivered at 8:48 a.m., sitting in the uncomfortable chair of my more uncomfortable cubicle. Work's really killing you, huh? A certain flavor of guilt washed over me when I realized I still didn't fully understand what her new job entailed. The title was Project Manager, but I always found the term nebulous. My mind shot back to words she'd mentioned when discussing it: neural networks and visual processing. They were coming up on a big project deliverable. I nodded, of course. I'd always nod. I put the phone down and subjected myself to the minutiae of the day. A watched pot never boils after all. Soon I'd get distracted, forget about everything, and then I'd hear from her. Corporate bureaucracy held my attention for a few hours when, bzzt, my phone vibrated. I checked it immediately. A dumb meme from a friend I hadn't spoken to in ages. Great. Already I was willing to cave on the internal rule I'd set for myself to not think about it. I sent her a new text, finally. "Hey hun, where are you?" And then called her too, for good measure. Her voicemail played, "Hi, this is Ella. Ella. A. I cannot answer the phone. The phone. Right now, so you should try to call me back, yeah. Back, yeah. This is really sad." And then laughter as her sing-song Rihanna impression broke down and I heard the beep. I waited for the phone to buzz again, for a call back. Something. When there was nothing, the next thought was, is a good husband supposed to call the cops immediately when he doesn't know where his wife is? Or was I just overthinking things? I left work early and depersonalized the entire way home. Speeding on the freeway, stuck in traffic, waiting for the light to change. Being colorblind, I go by traffic light position. Pulling into the driveway, all of it done with no real lucidity. At home, pacing back and forth in slippers on the hardwood floor, 6 p.m. turned to 7 p.m. turned to 9. I'd occasionally grab the remote, flip through some random streaming service, hoping something the all-seeing algorithm suggested might pull me away from my anxiety, but nothing did. So, when 10 p.m. rolled around, I called the cops. After a brief transfer, once I clarified that my situation was urgent, but perhaps not life or death urgent, the gruff voice on the other end of the line asked me when I'd last seen Ella, if this was unusual, and if she'd been going through anything recently, acting strangely, differently. Following my answer that, yes, this was a little out of the ordinary, and no, nothing seemed off before today, he then got her car and license details from me, told me they'd ping her phone, and assured me they'd circle back as soon as they could, maybe even send an officer to my house. They were on it. In short, words I found comforting before I realized that the boilerplate phrase was probably thrown around all the time by them. The bit of action I'd taken suddenly put my brain into motion. Co-workers. And yes, perhaps I was just overthinking, but still, co-workers. I spent too long workshopping the text messages to James and Preeti, her two colleagues I'd met at a couple of gatherings now. I wish people death when they cut me off in traffic, and yet I overthink sincerity in text to strangers. Maybe try therapy? Her voice in my head. Not now, hun. I'm trying to find you. I sent the text. Hey James, I hope you're well. I was curious if Ella is still at the office. Preeti. Basically the same text. Then, back to waiting again. In the blur of anxious monotony, I melted into my sofa, twiddled my thumbs, and ordered a grande mocha frappuccino via DoorDash TM for $18 because it felt like a wise financial move. I watched the app as the little icon crept down the streets. Jennifer, the driver, still had a few stops to make. A new text on my phone all of a sudden. Hi, is this Matt? To the jumble of numbers I didn't recognize but saw were from my area code, I responded, Yes, this is Matt. Before I could say more, the 3 typing dots appeared at the bottom of the screen, and the next messages came through in rapid succession. My name's Ken. I'm not sure if you remember, but I met you at bowling 2 months ago. Ping. My wife May works with Ella. They work on the same team. The bowling trip was organized by some of their co-workers. They allowed +1s. Ping. We had a WhatsApp group to organize heading there together. That's why I have your number. Hope you remember. I'm sorry for texting you out of the blue. I get it, Ken. And yes, I remember. Please get to the ping. My wife didn't come home last night from work. I tried reaching her co-workers. Friends too, everyone. No one knows where she is? Huh? I called him. It rang, and it rang, and it rang. I was just texting you. Please, for the love of all that is holy. Hello? He finally answered. Did any of her co-workers get back to you? I asked. What? You said you tried reaching her co-workers. Did they respond? Did they say they didn't know where she was? No, none of them got back to me. Do you think something happened? At work, maybe? I didn't like the words coming out of my mouth. I'll call you back, I said. I hung up, placed the phone down. Bzzzt, Ken already calling back. I breathed in deep and Googled the address of the high-rise building Ella worked in. It was a new build. I remembered when she first told me about the job in the office she'd be working in. Babe, look. Just look. There's a whole page about the amenities, she said. Sorry. I'm just slammed right now. All good. Didn't mean to bother. I'll look. Later I'll look. Promise. Of course, I didn't ever actually look. A knock at my door all of a sudden. Excitement and relief simultaneously before I opened it and saw the Starbucks bag on my doormat. Why would I do this to myself? Why would I spur hope like this? I grabbed the bag, brought it inside, returned to my laptop and steeled myself for any horrific articles about the building. No articles. I nonetheless wondered if it'd be worthwhile to go there, just to rule it out. Inaction would only make me spiral. Bzzzt. Ken calling again. A few missed calls from him now at this point. Tunnel vision was making me a prick. I answered. "Hi. I'm heading to the building," I said. "Oh," he said. "Okay. Then, want a carpool?" "I'm already en route," I lied. "But, meet you there?" Sure. I'll call you when you're—" I hung up, headed to the car. Off the backdrop of the night, I thought about her. Ella had auburn hair. She listened to ABBA in her headphones when she vacuumed. Always ABBA. Her favorite thing was shoving her phone into my face to show me something she was convinced was funny when it absolutely wasn't. She loved astrology memes. She hated the beach. Why? I'm not entirely sure. Our marriage has been rocky lately. We'd been doing the counseling thing. It was less fighting and more distance, I suppose. The recent line she'd been repeating was that she'd always been willing to make sacrifices and change for our relationship. I hadn't. I've been fixed, in place, unable to change. I secured my seatbelt, and as I did, I saw a new message on my phone from James. Her coworker. Anxiety now. I texted him back to elaborate on his typo-filled note. I tried calling him, multiple times. Radio silence. Heart palpitations now. I decided to start driving. I pulled into the expansive downtown parking lot surrounding the tower. Past the sea of dark headlights, I expected to see an inferno, or an explosion. Something horrific. Instead, everything seemed fine. Though it dawned on me that it was strangely hard to find parking. The lot was basically full, despite it being near midnight on a weeknight. I found purchase in a shadowy spot in the corner of the lot, parked, rushed out, sprinted to the building. Mid-sprint, I realized I'd passed Ella's car. Her beat-up Toyota Camry. There it was, just sitting, like an afterthought. I peered through the foggy backseat window to see if there was anything of note in the car. Nothing. But this did mean that either she'd left somewhere on foot, or more realistically, was still here, in the building. I continued on, the glass tower looming ahead, its windows dark and reflective. As I neared, it became clear most of the floors had their lights off, the shades drawn. Meanwhile, the sound of tires over gravel. Another car circling the lot. My phone rang. Ken. Again. I answered. "Is that you?" he said as I saw the man. In the car, 2 lanes down with cell phone pressed to ear, looking my way. "Yeah," I said. "Find parking. I'll meet you at the front of the building." I hung up. And then, I was there, at the base of the steps, James's strange text back to the forefront of my mind. Concrete steps led up to a broad landing before the glass entrance of the building. Beyond the doors sat a barren but exquisite lobby. The abject emptiness of the lightless foyer sat rather strangely with me. "Hey," I heard Ken's voice call from behind. I continued my staring contest with the building. Then I called my wife again, straight to voicemail. No ring this time. "Hi, this is Ella. 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 Hey. I cannot answer the phone. Ken was beside me now, salt and pepper hair. I remembered our bowling excursion together. The story about him and May moving here from South Korea after he landed an amazing job. I also remembered just how shit I was at bowling. "Should we go inside?" he asked. "I think so," I said. Then a thought hit me. "Late." I called 911 again. 991, what's your emergency? I called about my wife earlier, like an hour ago. Ella, I found her car. It's still parked where she... And that's when I heard the blare of the sirens and saw police strobes flashing across the lot, government plates rolling in. "Sir?" the operator said. "Actually, I think you guys are already here." I hung up, just as the lady said, "What do you mean?" and watched with Ken as the cops arrived. "Fuck," he said. What do you think happened? I don't know. A row of 4 police vehicles beelined right to the entrance. Ken and I backed up. He started calling his wife. Panicked. His breath grew rapid as he waited for a voice on the other end that I could tell he knew wasn't coming. May, call me back when you get this. I turned my attention to the new arrivals, spilling out of their vehicles donning uniforms. 13 or so of them pushed past Ken and myself, moved up the steps to the large space in front of the doors, and began stringing yellow police tape across the entrance of the high-rise, spreading out to hold the line. I saw a new crew, about 5, with tactical gear on, coming up right behind. Ready to enter, I heard one of the men on the tactical unit say into the mic on his shoulder. He pulled open the glass entrance door, the lobby beyond swallowed by darkness, and stepped inside, 4 others filing in behind him. I tried to get a better look inside, but the view through the swung-open door showed nothing. The glass walls hadn't already revealed. The rest of the units remained behind the tape. I cautiously made my way up the steps. Ken remained where he was. Maybe he didn't want to hear the grisly details of what might have taken place inside. I wasn't different from him in that way, but I needed to know what was going on. An officer approached me as I hit the landing at the top of the steps. As we spoke, it felt like our words were dancing past each other. Hi, I said. We can't share any more information at this time. My wife works in that building. We've sent a team in, but unfortunately we can't. Just tell me if it's a hostage situation. Like I said, we can't say anything. A different officer came, up beside him, on the younger side, bags under her eyes. I don't think it's a hostage situation, she said. An eyebrow raised from the other cop. I don't really know what it is exactly. I think that's probably the best we can say, right? I paused for a second. What? She started, but then her expression shifted, as if she'd already said too much. She stopped herself, turned with her partner away from me, struggling with what to do next. I maneuvered back down the steps, reached Ken. What did they say? He asked. They don't think it's a hostage situation. They're figuring it out. Sent some people inside, yeah, I saw. Yeah. Another look back at the building. It was almost taunting me to enter. Then, I headed back to my car. I could feel Ken wanting to ask me where I was going, but opting not to. I reached the shadowy corner of the lot again. I sat passenger, side in my vehicle, readjusted the seat to incline as far back as possible. I had no idea what to do or what the fuck was happening. But a watched pot never boils, and so I let the heaviness of my eyelids shut me out from the world. Ella wasn't too far away from me. She was right there, in that building. I just needed to distract myself. The cops would figure it out. It would all be okay. I drifted off. I woke up groggy, drooling. The lot was as dark as it was when I'd first fallen asleep. I checked the time. 2 a.m. Solid hour and a half of an existential nap. I left the car, approached the building again, this time sure that the time-lapse would bring with it an insane amount of energy, fanfare, around the front of the building. I dreaded it, yet I moved towards it. Footstep, footstep, footstep. Awaiting bad news, really. Footstep, footstep, footstep. I had a dream once that she'd died. Most of the details slipped my mind, but I remembered the feeling of that dream. It had felt like my life was completely over, like nothing mattered anymore. Footstep, footstep, footstep. Again my feet brought me to the edge of the steps where a scene that was both more as well as less met me. The police presence looked much larger now. More cars than before, at least. And yet, a sort of empty feeling enveloped everything. I couldn't spot a single soul amidst the scaled-up operation. Besides Ken, of course, slumped on the walkway leading to the steps, eyes half open, drifting, in and out. Where is everyone? I shouted. Shuffling. I saw someone emerge from the back of one of the squad cars, looking frazzled. It was the woman from before, the one who said she didn't think it was a hostage situation. You should leave, she said. Where'd they all go? I asked again. She struggled. They went inside. And? What did they say? It took her a second to finish it, but she completed the sentence by saying, they haven't answered, just as all of the lights in the building turned on. Every floor, every room, illuminated. Before I could even say anything, they all turned off. All I could do was stand still. Blink. What the fuck? That happened an hour ago, too, she said nervously. Everyone who went inside, I said, trying to process. They just stopped responding? Yeah. The first team never responded when we tried radioing them. Next crew? Same thing. Then another group. And now it's just me. As if telepathically able to discern I was going to ask her the obvious question. We have more people coming, she tagged. They told me to stay back to keep continuity. My wife is in there. Do you know anything? I don't. No. But something in her body language said otherwise. Please, I said, a beat. They just sent me some footage. From inside? She pointed around the lot. No, from the exterior cameras in the moments leading up. Show me. She looked at me like I was crazy. Your whole crew is missing, I continued. If this isn't the time to mess with the rulebook, I don't know when is. A sharp inhale through her nostrils, then a half-centimeter, barely perceptible nod. She headed towards her car. As I followed her, Ken rushed up beside me, having awoken from his sidewalk nap. The officer looked back, eyes saying, Seriously? My wife's in there too, he said, likely having overheard the tail end of our conversation. She said nothing, just headed for her cruiser and unlocked the doors. Ken and I climbed into the back seat. From the front, she pulled the dash-mounted screen towards her, tapped a few keys, then angled it so we could see. The video showed security footage of the front entrance of the building, being fast-forwarded through. Hour after hour slipped by, the timestamp in the corner racing ahead as we only saw people entering the tower, never stepping out. We reached the point in the footage where the final squad went inside, and there it stopped. She then pressed a button and started rewinding the footage. The hours ticked backwards from present moment as we saw a replay of the last 2 days until roughly 48 hours ago.